Another millimeter here, a millisecond there. Almost identical inner displays, also pretty much identical camera enclosures, not to mention the outside display as well, and sometimes some truly creepy AI features. The new Samsung Galaxy Fold 6 once again is quite the weak upgrade from the Fold 5. Now, granted, there are a handful of changes. A couple of them do make a noticeable difference. How noticeable? I'll leave that up to you. At the end of the day, these phones are literally the exact same device, minus, some little upgrades on the wrapping paper, which we'll get into. But I don't know about you. I'm kind of tired of these small offerings. I know it's probably much end stage capitalism trying to milk us out for everything we have, but I think we've normalized upgrades on phones with minimal changes, and we've kind of made companies okay to kind of squeeze us for every dollar we have for something that's just not worth the price tag. So let's just get right into the specs here. As you're gonna see, the millimeters. That's literally what you're getting, otherwise the exact same type of materials. You're gonna see the difference in the size of that front screen. This surprisingly does make a difference. It doesn't look like much, and I'll get to that later in the video, but you're gonna see not the biggest bump up in screen size. The interior display, as you're going to see with the specs above, the most minimal of changes in the aspect ratio, otherwise barely noticeable changes in experience. The camera enclosures, though they look different, they look like they might be something different. The only thing you're getting different is that ultra-wide sensor, which they say is more of an AI thing that will enhance photos at night. I'll show you some ultra-wide photos between the two phones here. You're gonna see some contrast and kind of saturation differences, but that is literally gonna be the AI from what I've been reading. It's just a different sensor. Otherwise, the photos you're gonna get on these two devices and all of the bells and whistles are gonna be the exact same thing. No differences in the camera. Some minor changes. One brushed, one polished aluminum, one more rounded, one more sharper corners. When it comes to weight, we are going to see that the 6 does come in with a lighter weight. Very minimal again, but it is, you can feel it. The biggest thing you want to look at is this crease. Here we have the Fold 5. This is the Fold 6. Now, still a crease, it's still there, but personally, for me, I would wager that it's been reduced like 50%. And it's kind of tough to show on camera because both of these phones, depending on the angle, obviously, and the lighting and what you have on the screen, both of these creases will disappear. It's when you're rubbing your finger across that you're really going to tell the difference. And I'm not going to say the 5 is a huge crease already. It definitely, I forget it's there even when I was using the 5, but that is definitely a noticeable thing when you're running your finger across the screen. It has been reduced, I would say, by a good 50%, which is good to see. It is a change that is welcomed and definitely noticeable. As I said, depending upon what you have on the screen and what's playing and the colors on the screen, you're gonna see that crease kind of appear and disappear. But honestly, both, you're gonna forget they're there with use over time, though again, can't stress enough, this is a change on the 6 that is noticeable and definitely welcomed. While we're on some noticeable changes, that brightness, outer display and inner display, you are going to see a difference outside in bright direct light. The pixels, you're not going to see a big difference, but that increase in nits is quite drastic. The 5 didn't have a problem outside, but you're definitely not going to have a problem with the upgrade in the 6 with that bump up in nits. Now, I don't believe there was any changes made to the speakers on these phones, but for whatever reason, this sounded a little bit more bassy, and this one less so. Again, I'm not an audiophile, but I'll play a little bit here and let you listen and see if you can tell a difference. But in terms of maximum volume, both very similar and yeah, very minor in that, if any at all. Now, when it comes to the upgrade in the chipsets, I'm just going to go through some basic opening of apps and some games to show you again. This is the milliseconds and the millimeters I'm talking about. In video, you can definitely see it, but in daily use, it is very minimal. So yes, that upgrade to the Gen 3 versus the Gen 2, you're going to see, more intensive games open quicker. And I'll get later to in a little second here, when you're just opening apps like Instagram and YouTube and playing videos and surfing the internet, it's even less so. More what you're going to see with the difference here is going to be for this new AI that's being put into the phone, which is supposed to come to later generation folds, probably just the 5 if I'm going to be honest, but the 5 is probably going to get the AI as well. So this Gen 3 chipset is going to probably benefit that more than anything. But when it comes to games and playing games, as you're going to see here and opening apps, everything is going to run fairly smoothly, and it's literally just saving you those milliseconds. So I wouldn't take much credence into opening of apps and speed of surfing the net. In everyday use scenarios, you're going to see very minimal difference here. It's going to probably be more so for that AI, which we are going to get into very shortly here. But right before we get into that, I wanted to talk about that minimal bump up in size and that front display. It doesn't seem like a lot, but for whatever reason, typing with 2 fingers on the 5 is tough. As you can see, your fingers are going to crash every time if you're two-handed typing. I had a lot of errors when I would type, but for whatever reason, this minimal increase in size really truly did allow my fingers to kind of maneuver a lot more smoothly over that front display, and I didn't have to utilize that one-handed typing action as often, which I'm not a huge fan of. This was one thing in another video that I talked about that I just hated. I hate that narrow display, and it's one of the reasons why I enjoyed the Pixel Fold much better. With this new update in size in that front screen, I'm going to say it's more similar in size, in terms of width anyway, as the iPhone XS. Not the Plus, just the regular one. So for me, as small as it is, I wish it was a little bit more, but I definitely did see a decrease in two-handed typing errors and a much more comfortable experience on the Fold 6. So let's get to the real benefit of that Gen 3 chip, which will be for the AI in the Fold 6. As of right now, as it's baked in, I feel it's more gimmicky than anything. It's not super fast, and at least in the sketch feature itself, it doesn't pump out the greatest images, more like nightmare fuel, if anything. These ones were much better than the ones in the beginning of my video, but definitely still horrendous. For whatever reason, when you go to photos and you want to sketch something into a photo, as you're going to see here, it does a much better job, much more realistic. There's shadows. It really looks like a real object versus, a 4-year-old's nightmare. It does take some time, but as is right now, I just really don't see it being more than a gimmick. I'm sure they're going to develop it, but it's probably going to take them 3 or 4 more iterations of folds to actually get something that people are going to use on an everyday basis. They do say they are going to bring this feature to other phones. I'm assuming probably not too far back, but probably the Fold 5 is going to get this. It's just going to be a slower slog through as it generates the AI images as you sketch them in. As mentioned, both phones 25-watt wired and 15-watt wireless, so nothing to write home about. Both of these phones are going to lie flat, perfectly flat, and close pretty much as good as any foldable phone can close at the moment. Finally, one more minor upgrade. You're getting IP48 from IPX8, something we would hope we would have had a long time ago, because obviously you don't want little particles and dust getting into the hinge and totally ruining a $2,000+ device. So thank you for giving us some of the most minimal dust protection possible. Another little minor thing I will say is the hinge on the 5 definitely has a little bit more resistance. It's a little bit more tougher when, especially that 90-degree angle opening and closing. It is a little bit of a stiffer experience, whereas for whatever reason, the 6, it's less resistance. At that 90-degree, it opens much more smoother. So another minor change, something just to be said, it is a smoother experience with the 6. So with all of that being said, and how minor the spec bump has been in the 6, paying more money right out the gate if you want to buy this than when this came out a year ago. They bumped the price tag up. You weren't getting as much bonus offers. They actually doubled the interior capacity. I got it from 256 to 512. They were not offering that this time around for me anyway. The trade-in was not as aggressive. Still pretty good, but not as aggressive as with the 5. So for a minor bump in specs, for that dust resistance, that Gen 3 chip, and also a reduced crease. Those are the 3 things I'm going to say you're getting difference in terms of that you're going to actually notice with this device. Of course, for me, as I mentioned, that outer display, that minor, like I said, a millimeter change did make a difference for me. But I know from my last video that I posted versus the Pixel, a lot of people didn't really care about that narrow display. And to be honest, like a millimeter, come on, it's a joke to me. For me, I was happy that it improved my experience, but it was so minor that I really can't even include that in the top 3 things that you probably will notice as a user of this device. Is that worth spending an extra 1,000 or 1,200 with the trade-in or buying straight up? I don't know. It's getting to a point, like I said, where I feel these companies don't have to work for us anymore. We'll buy anything. They could make this device so much better. There's so many great companies out in China. I'm not going to say great companies, but so many companies pushing the bar in terms of devices. We know the technology is there, but companies like Apple and Samsung just have such a dominant hold on the North American market. There's no reason for them to give us the improvements we deserve for the prices they're charging. So I'll just leave this honest review with you and let you make up your mind whether you think these improvements are worth your hard-earned dollars. So with that, thanks for watching, and as always, take it easy, be safe and well, and until the next one.